Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I am so excited to talk about today's episode. It is all about Yarrow folklore. So if you listened to the last episode, you heard me kind of argue with myself a few different times. The last episode was about the physical medicine of Yarrow, the medicinal benefits, and I wanted to talk about the folklore in that episode so bad because there is so much crossover between the two topics. And so we're doing a whole separate episode just about the folklore. A little bit of the medicine will still come in because it's intrinsically tied together. Like, folklore can tell us so much about the medicinal benefits of plants if we really listen to the stories and really listen to the plants. So we're going to start out this episode by talking a bit about my own personal folklore with this plant. So my first introduction to yarrow was a bit unorthodox. I had learned about yarrow in herbal classes, but I hadn't worked with it yet. And so this was years before now. So this is like 2020, and it's before I had my business, and I was contemplating starting one, and I needed some guidance. So I did a meditation where I spoke to my ancestors to look for some ancestral guidance, not specifically for the business. I was leaving it open to whatever wanted to come through, but that was definitely heavy on my mind. And so during this meditation, I received a recipe, a very specific herbal recipe, including what plants need to be wildcrafted, the name of the product, everything. So when I kind of came out of the meditation, the plant that needed to be wildcrafted was yarrow. At this time, I lived in Oklahoma, and I didn't really know very many people there. I didn't really have a community. I wasn't there for very long. So I was in a local Facebook group for, I think it's mostly gardening, to be honest, but I reached out in there to see if anyone had yarrow growing wild on their property that I could come harvest from, because I knew that yarrow was a native plant to that area. And so when I posted that, someone replied and said, "Hey, I have yarrow that grows on my property. You can totally come and harvest it." So she was about an hour away. So I made the plan to go harvest the yarrow at her property. Now, when I got there, I was blown away. I immediately knew why I needed to wild harvest this plant. This property was my dream exactly. There was a huge greenhouse, a huge big like farm style house, horses, chickens, dogs, goats. There was a structured garden as well as like a wild prairie area with native plants. There was a river that ran down the side. And speaking with the owner, I found out that she was an herbalist. She taught herbalism out of her house. She homeschooled her kids. The greenhouse is where she grew fruits and vegetables to sell at the local farmers market. It was the dream that I had made real. And the reason that I needed to see this was because I never believed that it was possible. I had this wild fantasy in my head, and I had never seen it in real life or someone actually like living this idea that I had. And so by going to her property, I was able to see this made real. Not only that, this woman was amazing, and I wish I remembered her name and what her business was, but I really don't, and I feel so bad. But she was just so at ease and so generous. She filled my arms with all sorts of goodies and told me to come back if I needed anything. She invited me to use their river for kayaking access. She told me to watch for her at the farmer's market or to swing by for a class or if I needed any produce. And she was just amazing. Like, I want to say perfect, but no one's perfect. But she was how I wanted to be, how I dreamed of myself being, how I dreamed of my life looking. And she was she was it. So here I am 5 years later, living parts of that dream, building to that dream. And so for me, Yarrow holds a very special place in my heart because of this experience, and I now have my own folklore with this plant. To me, Yarrow now represents dreams come to life and community and hard work being made manifest. So I have a whole different story with Yarrow that is not seen in a lot of the other stories, but like that is my folklore. And modern day folklore holds an important place in our world as well. All these stories that we read of olden day folklore, those were the modern folklore at the time. So now that I am creating my own folklore and you're creating your own folklore with whatever plants you're interacting with, those stories can be passed down and spread out. And maybe one day one of our stories will be looked at kind of how we look at these older folklore stories that I'm going to share today. So that was my introduction to working with Yarrow, and to kind of bring it back around a little bit, that recipe that my ancestors gave me ended up being the first product that I launched my business with. And it was a salve, like a natural antibiotic salve for cuts, scrapes, bug bites, dry cracked hands, whatever. But as we learned about in the Yarrow medicine episode, Yarrow is great for first aid issues. So wonderful plant to have in that first herbal product for my business. So now let's talk about some of the recorded folklore for Yarrow. First, there is folklore just in the Latin name. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to say this because throughout my herbal studies, it has been so hard to hear specific Latin names pronounced by anyone. So I have heard this one a lot of times, so I know I'm saying it correct, but there are other plants that I have never been able to hear someone say it out loud. And so I will give it my best because I want to be the resource, I guess, that I couldn't find when I was looking for other plants, like specifically trying to find kava kava, like the botanical name. I'm not even going to say it because I can't remember all of it, but there is something to say that learning the Latin names of plants is super beneficial for your herbal studies, but you will feel really stupid when you're trying to pronounce them because you don't know if you're saying them correctly. So, good luck. So, Achillea millefolium is the Latin name for Yarrow. Now, what's awesome is if you listen to the name, you hear a little bit of the folklore. So, Achillea is named after the Greek hero Achilles, who was a warrior, but also, surprise, an herbalist. So it is said that he would treat his men on the battlefield to stop the bleeding from the puncture wounds and injuries. One of the nicknames for Yarrow is woundwort. So that's where kind of that comes from. And then millefolium in Latin for thousand leaves, referring to the fern-like leaves of the yarrow. So also, what's kind of fun is that going back to the medicinal episode, Yarrow is wonderful for puncture wounds specifically. And that's kind of what a lot of the old battlefield injuries were, like with Achilles, was puncture wounds. So just wonderful wraparound there. So Yarrow spans centuries and land masses, and many cultures have their own rituals and uses for this beautiful plant. So we're going to talk about some, and I'm going to kind of break it down into regions. So in Europe, Yarrow has many tales of divination, protection, and finding love. There's a lot of love rituals with Yarrow, which we'll talk about a few because they're really funny. But my favorite Yarrow story is this story from Celtic lands where Yarrow was considered an evil plant, but also a protective plant. So Yarrow was considered an evil plant and associated with witches. To help protect against the witches, the people would hang Yarrow by their front door or over, like thrown over their threshold on the ground to help keep witches and ill intent away. However, the witches worked with Yarrow to protect themselves from the other people. So we have two groups of people that use Yarrow both as a protective way, but against each other. And it's really funny when you try to imagine it, that, you're walking to someone's house and like you see the yarrow hang by their door. And so you're like, oh, this person must be just like me, but they're like the exact opposite, if you get what I'm saying. And that also digs into the physical medicine of yarrow, where we have that blood stopping and blood starting ability, where it's like the same thing but opposite, just in this case, same thing but opposite. And that's my favorite, one of my favorite yarrow folklores, because it's just hilarious. But also, specifically in Ireland, we have a really fun protection ritual with yarrow. So it says that when planning on traveling, you pull up 10 stalks of yarrow, keep 9 in your bundle, and throw the 10th back into the field. That 10th is an offering to the spirits, and the 9th you are to put under your right heel, and this would ensure protection from the evil spirits on your travel. So we see another protective theme there. There is an old Gaelic incantation for when you're picking yarrow, and it goes like this. I pluck the smooth yarrow, that my finger be sweeter, that my lips be warmer, that my voice be gladder. So just a little sweet incantation there for when you're picking yarrow. Now, also in Celtic traditions, yarrow was used regularly in hem fastenings and weddings, believed to keep the couple happy for years to come. So yarrow was often used in the bouquets, but also given as gifts, like a yarrow plant given as a wedding gift, to kind of like wish them good luck on their life together. Some other traditions were that they would keep small satchels of yarrow under their pillows to enhance dreams and visions. And the Druids would use yarrow to divine the weather forecast with them as well. Now, if you remember back, I said that there's a lot of love stuff around yarrow. So here is a little love ritual where it would be to divine who your true love was. So you would stick a piece of yarrow underneath your pillow, and if you dreamt of your love, then it was a good sign. But if you had a bad dream or dreamed of another person, then that love was not meant for you. There is another version of this ritual where, like, you sleep with yarrow or you put it under your shoe. I can't remember which one it was, but then you go to church, and the first man that you see at church is supposed to be your true love. Obviously, it was mostly women doing the love divining and love rituals, but that's just some of the fun Celtic folklore, and just kind of funny that you do some magic and then you go to church. So when we start looking at other places around the world, we also have graves in Iraq dating back to 60,000 years ago that had yarrow laid in the graves as well. And then for the Anishinaabe people, they have some yarrow stories around yarrow being protective and to scare off evil. So it was often hung or tied along with sweetgrass and cedar on the doors and windows, or powdered down and mixed with either sand or other herbs and poured across doorways, window sills, like thresholds in general, to help protect the home, because it said that evil could not cross a line of yarrow. Now, moving on to the east, we have the I Ching, which is a divination manual from the Western Zhou period. ZHOU. This is like 1000 to 750 BC. It's a complication process, and I don't really fully understand it, so I'm not going to explain it. But yarrow stalks were used as a divination method. Something about 50 dried yarrow stalks, and like how they were sorted in different ways. You would receive a number that corresponded to a chart, and it's a whole divination process. I'm sure you can find someone that understands it. I tried, and it wasn't for me. But it was also really cool to see yarrow used literally all over the world. We have all sorts of different lands and peoples that worked with yarrow specifically through divination and protection. And it's really cool to see cultures who never interacted with each other have the same belief systems around plants. So that also tells you so much, where there's the plant spirit communication. Like, that's something that we don't do enough in our modern day world. And probably because we also have access to so much more information that we don't feel like we need to, but it's still super important to speak to the plants and get their messages because they they just have so much to teach us. And we have all these examples here where these people from all over different parts of the world were working with Yarrow, receiving the same Yarrow messages and guidance as someone else on the other side of the or not even continent, but like other side of the world. So that is what I have for today. I hoped you learned a fun new little story or ritual and something that you can pass on to your friends and family to keep herbal folklore alive. And if you have your own personal folklore with Yarrow, I would love to hear about it. You can send me an email at hello@rootandwandercollective.com or find me on Instagram at rootandwandercollective because I love hearing different people's plant stories and interactions, kind of like how you see in my story, where all these other folklores are talking about like divination and love and protection, and none of those really applied to my own personal story with Yarrow. So I would love to hear about your personal stories with the plants as well. If you would like to learn more about my offerings and classes, you can find them at rootandwandercollective.com, and I'll see you along the plant path.